Bullshit.
It's the No BS Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich, with our guest today, Dr. Lisa Ziggy Zellick Walters. All right, so we finished the last show with you telling us a little bit about BS in the workplace when you saw some BS, and it was about people unwilling to change, people doing things the same way, sort of tied back to the rant. The rant for this, the Zig podcast was, "That's not my problem." Mm-hmm. So you talked about a corporate culture. You had to leave because the culture was unhealthy. There was one person can't really change the culture unless they are the CEO. Mm-hmm. So now let's flip it the other way. Talk about a learning experience when maybe you were a BS employee, a tough boss, or maybe your communication wasn't what it needed to be. Looking back, when do you think you might have been guilty of some BS?
Oh, I know I was guilty of BS in that same organization. Because as I was trying to basically acclimate back into that group, I would maybe start to present data to other departments that would make I wouldn't say that I changed the data. I would just present the data that would be more flattering. You know what I mean? I wouldn't maybe present the whole picture. So what did Mark Twain say? Lies, damn lies, and statistics. So I would just put out there what I thought was the appropriate thing to put out there, because that was the game we were obviously playing, and I was going to be a player to that as well. And then I think the point is when I really started figuring out that I was playing spin doctor myself, that that was really the time that I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? This is just not what I want to do. It's not. Does it make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The No BS Marketing Podcast with Dave Mastovich is brought to you by Mass Solutions. Put our 3-step No BS process to work for you. Visit masssolutions.biz today to take your marketing to another level. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.
This show is the No BS Marketing Show. It's brought to you by Audible. Do you use Audible for books?
I will now, because I heard the website and there's a free trial offer.
Yes.
And I'll go ahead and jump on that.
There you
yes,
go.
it's at...
I have a long ride home. Maybe
there
I
you
can
go.
get
It's at www, which I laugh, you don't have to ever say anymore, but audibletrial.com/nobs. It gets you a free month, a free book, and there's 180,000 titles to choose from. It's incredible.
I will check it out.
I'm going to recommend the Elon Musk book that I'm listening to right now.
Okay.
Although I also got the Jeff Bezos book. Now, I read books still, but the listening is for just driving around. I tend to do those ones more for enjoyment because I will say this, listening to a book isn't the same as reading it from a documentation standpoint. Neither is reading on a Kindle the same as reading a tactile book.
I agree.
I use Kindle like crazy, but I really enjoy Kindle, but I honestly don't retain it quite as much as when I can have the book in my hand and put notes in it.
I think it's really nice, too, that you're like listening and reading books, and Audible is really good for that, because we read so much for information that we don't read enough literature, no matter what that literature is, and we're limiting our creativity because of that.
It's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the No BS Marketing Show, so let's talk about marketing. Our definition of marketing is clearly defining your target markets, finding out what they want through marketing intel, developing it if you don't already have it, giving it to them when and where they want it at a price they're willing to pay, and then telling them about it again and again. Now, the key to this, Zig, is clearly defining those target markets and drilling them down. And we talk a lot about data, whichever way you want to pronounce it, and that part of clearly defining target markets we feel is neglected by most people that say they're doing marketing. Then the second part is marketing intel, which I think you'll appreciate because it ties back to research to some degree, even though most of our research is qualitative. We do some quantitative, but most qualitative. We then go out and talk to customers, we talk to referral sources, we talk to employees, and what they tell you is often different than what the company thinks. So you have to come back and tweak your product accordingly, so you can give it to them when and where they want it at a price they're willing to pay. And then the telling them about it can be fun. But most people misguidedly think that marketing is that last part, the telling them about it. So now that you've heard this crazy definition that we live here every day at Mass Solutions, think back to your most amazing moment in your experience with marketing, messaging, or communications. What's your biggest marketing or messaging success?
I'm going to say, and it goes to data. It goes to data. Is when the group of us we were charged with providing a mechanism, if you would, to a creditor. to show that we were not only in compliance, but in achieving quality within our particular systems. And, it's easy to present lagging data, lagging indicators, deviation data, or, things that went wrong, problem data, I guess I would show. It's easy to do those kinds of things. But when we sat down, this group of us, and put together some data that incorporated some other levels of how do I want to say it? Contextual data, I guess. So maybe tying it into hours in training, maybe tying it into years of experience, those kinds of things. And when we would put that together as a whole package, the accreditors, I think, had a lot better understanding of how we know we were achieving what needed to be achieved in the quality management system for accreditation. So I think they might have accepted, just the normal, like you would go to your organization and would say, well, these are our problems, our on-time deliveries and all of this over time, and they could get that. But when we were able to say, well, we look at it along these different levels, and this is what we say is a quality experience in the quality management system. This is how we know, and we had different dimensions in that. I think that was like a big win because of the way it was presented, and we gave them maybe not only what they thought they wanted, but beyond what they wanted.
When it comes to messaging, we have to understand both our why, our reason for being, and our customers' why, their reason for buying. We then need to crystallize that into one big idea, one memorable message or theme that makes an emotional impact on our target audiences. So, Ziggy Zellick, Dr. Lisa Walters, whether it's for you personally or your company, what's your big idea?
I have a big idea. It's a part of my research interest. I think if I could, if I can talk about that a little bit, maybe that bores people.
Let's talk.
But okay, yeah, it does, because it's compliance. So when I talk about compliance, I think a lot of people, like in the finance industry and accounting industry, they're thinking Sarbanes-Oxley and so forth, which, by the way, is a process. Okay, is a process standard. But I look at compliance like regulatory compliance in manufacturing processes, and my big idea is to develop the model of compliance, like what makes one organization compliant and what makes one not, and in trouble with regulators. So like large organizations that get under, do you know what a consent decree is? Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm not asking because like a lot of people are like, I don't know what that is. But when you get under a consent decree, like a pharmaceutical or a medical device company, this can cost you like average, I think a Deloitte study was $5 million to get out. I mean, that's a nice chunk of change. By the time you set up your, units, I mean, your department's dedicated to getting out of compliance. I mean, out of consent decrees and so forth. So it's just interesting though, is like some of these organizations, and I'll use Red Cross as an example, and because they recently got out from under a consent decree, congratulations to them, but they struggled under it for many years, and it took a lot of leadership and to get out from underneath that. But you might find within that same governance of the American Red Cross Biomedical, you might have one facility that's very compliant and another that's not. Well, why? Because they're under the same type of governance. They have the same policies and procedures and so forth. So my big idea is to identify over the course of my life, this would be like my life's work, to identify what are the major contributors to compliance so that we could develop a predictive model of if an organization is going to be compliant based on these kinds of things. And that's my big idea if I can only get to it.
Awesome.
Wow.
Impressive.
It's huge.
So pick a tool or a tip you'd offer that will help our audience tell their story, craft their message, or communicate to internal, external target audience. Or it could just be something that helps with their productivity.
I think, well, this will help them tell their story and help with their productivity. I think that even if you're a small business, I think you ought to get a hold of some statistical software, whether that be Minitab or like Tableau, SPSS. To me, no, I don't know. My drug of choice is Minitab because I was learned on it.
Okay.
So I enjoy Minitab. It's easy for me to use. But and there are also like macros for Excel that are rather affordable. But I don't care what size business you are. Start collecting a little bit of data and start to understand. Like use it for forecasting. Look to see how much downtime you have. There's something as simple in Minitab or in any quality, there is a quality tool called Pareto analysis. If nothing else in your life and your business, get a way to visualize what 20% of the issues are causing you 80% of the problem.
And that is called?
Pareto analysis.
But it's the Pareto principle. Give me some.
Yep.
Not the pleasure principle by Janet Jackson, but
That's
the
something
Pareto
different.
principle.
Yeah, that's something
Pareto
different.
principle.
Yeah. So, that's if nothing else, do that and track your problem data.
Beautiful.
Nothing else.
I couldn't have paid her to say that's what we put all of a big piece of our basis on is so many clients don't look at that 80-20.
Yeah, that absolutely. That's the big thing.
So we're with Dr. Lisa Walters, PhD, also formerly Ziggy Zelick, grew up with her kindergarten through 12th grade. She was brilliant then and still brilliant now. She has 15 or 20 letters after her name. She's a faculty member at the State University of New York, Fredonia. She also teaches for Penn State Erie, Penn State Barron, whatever you want to call it. She's had her own consulting firm, and right now she's in the midst of the sights and sounds of marketing, and we try to tie these to our guests. So this episode's Sights and Sounds of Marketing starts with the term big data, or is it data?
I say data. But
Okay, so
it doesn't matter.
Big data,
I
big
just can't
data.
spell it.
Well, catchphrases that become part of our lexicon help communicate big ideas, and that's just what the term big data did and continues to do. So you're a huge big data person, Zig. Let's talk about big data and what you think it means.
Well, I think, when we had this idea of the internet and how much information there is, this is what I think ushers this in, right? That ushers the idea in of being able to have so much data at our disposal that we had never, ever had before. I think on a daily basis, and I believe this comes from Bernard Marr, that there were like 10 billion exchanges of information on Facebook a day. 10 billion. And all of the data from the beginning of time until 2008, we will begin to exchange in a very short period of time, daily, like per minute. And it just really gives you a sense of how much information is out there and what we can do with it. So, but I think this is, the idea is that we don't want to just think of data as a volume. That's just one V. There are what they call the 5 V's of data. And
what are they?
The volume is one. Okay, so
vivacious.
Vivacious. Yeah. Well, that's a good one. We should add that. We should make it the 6th one.
There you go.
I tell you. Okay, we're going.
Vavoom.
Vavoom. Yeah, vavoom beta. Okay, so volume. So we have volume. So like we used to talk about megabytes and things. That's like child's play. So now we start to talk about Bronto bites. Doesn't that sound like something you know what I mean?
From
like,
Fred Flintstone.
Yeah,
Cereal.
Okay,
Cereal on Fred
your
Flintstone.
Bronto bites, bam, bam. Okay, so right, Bronto bites. So we do have large volumes of data, but so that's one characteristic of data. Another one might be the velocity of data, and what that means is the speed that the data occurs. So if something has like slow velocity, it might be like a data point that just occurs yearly. But if it has fast velocity or high, it could be like minute to minute. Okay, so that velocity. The other one is veracity, and that means like the uncertainty in the data. And you can think about that. You probably deal with this all the time. You know how you said like the qualitative data?
Yes.
That's really dark data. Right?
Yes.
You have structured data and you have like this unstructured data, and then that's like dark data because people can
It's also dark
hashtag
sometimes
whatever,
what we find
and they
out.
might put a little acronym in there, or they might call it something different, but they're still the same thing. So there's uncertainty in the way that stuff is interpreted. And how do you mine for that? That becomes very difficult, to
Yes.
try to find that information. So I think you probably deal with that quite a bit.
It's very dark around here.
Right. So
But our light bulb effect in our logo is we try to bring some light to it.
I saw that. I like that. Yeah, that's very nice. And so then the other one is variety, and that means you have a lot of data from different places. So you do have qualitative, you have quantitative. You can, and under that, categorical type of data, which of course is a qualitative type. So there are a lot of different ways that you can get all the information. How does that information kind of fit together to paint a picture for you? And then the last one is value. It has to. We're data rich, right? We're data rich society world, right? But we don't make sense of a lot of that data because it's just so huge. And we even have a storage problem, right? Because we're talking about Bronto bites. You just can't put that in your freezer, okay? So you can have, all these different data warehouses and things. And how do we get all of those networks to talk together so that we can get meaningful information from that? So I think when I think of big data, I don't just think of volume. I got to think about all those other things that go along with it. Like to me, and like big data is meaningful information. is all of that.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Getting meaning. There was last week I was at a terrific conference, data across the disciplines. And it was up there in Niagara Falls, and this is the place where I told you all these really smart people were, and I was showing everybody my purse because I had nothing else to offer them. And it was the provost of Buff State. She's history. Her PhD is in history, and she gave a story about that I just think really brings it home, because we always think, well, we have data. Well, the data, you got to know maybe the data, maybe another V is validate, right? Because she was saying about these two, I guess, pretty renowned historians that took it upon themselves. They were going to evaluate the impact of slavery. And was it all that bad? That's what you're going to take that on. You better know what the hell you're doing. Okay, right? No bullshit. Okay, all right? They got to know. So the one thing they took on was one of the well-accepted problems of slavery is the breakup of family. Okay, you're breaking up families. And so they did a study. They collected all this data out of New Orleans, and they looked at it, and they said, you know what? This isn't a problem. Not one family was broken up over this period of time. They put this out there. Well, that's because in Louisiana, it was illegal to do that. That was the only place. Yeah. Right? So they never looked beyond their boundaries.
Okay.
So you have to know, people are like, well, the computers are going to take over everything. Well, I don't know, because I did see that Terminator movie and it did disturb me. But but I think you got to think about, the computers can give you information and they can give you an analysis and make a recommendation, but you got to, as a human being, there's intervention. Yep. You know what I mean, that you have to do. So I think that's what I think about about big data is like being careful about the data. That there's a saying, you'll get what you measure. And that's...
Well, the thing that we try to bring to clients is exactly what you said happens is they have so much data, but they don't really have information to make decisions from. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when I think of big data, I think of the next step of what you just described, which is making it so it's not intimidating and so it is useful. When we talk about Pareto principle and the 80-20, we're saying to someone, and then they start getting fixated on, well, I don't know if I can get all that information, who I'd gather that from, and this is sometimes coded that way, and I don't know if I want to give you that, sign this non-disclosure, and we almost say, like, just get us something that gets us close, because we're not worried about exactly. When we do the 80-20, it might be 78-22.
That's right.
And we go, who cares?
Who cares?
We still showed you that the vast majority of your business is coming from these people. Let's figure out how to replicate those people and get more of them, and let's also figure out how to make them happy.
That's right.
And that's the difference between just gobs of information.
That's right. Jerry Sobrowski, the guy I talked about from ASQ that was like mentors me in Six Sigma, and even when I have questions now, he's always there for me. He always says, "Do not let perfect be the enemy of good."
Exactly, he's right. Mm-hmm. So the term big data seems to have grown the most in the year 2000. There are even articles about when it seemed to gain traction. One article describing and debating whether it was 1998 or 2000 gives credit to Francis Diebold, a University of Pennsylvania professor. He claims to have been the first to publish a paper or study big data. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go with that as the year for the Sights and Sounds of the year 2000.
I was only 12 years old, so it's going to be hard for me, 12. But I'll try.
So someone that you competed against in some of those youth singing battles was Christina Aguilera, a Pittsburgh native, wins the Grammy for Best New Artist.
Okay.
You never heard of her?
No, I have heard of her. Yeah, I'm not a fan. Is that okay to say?
Yes. It's an OBS show. You have to be honest.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I mean, I'm just not a big fan of her. That's her brand, though, right?
That genie in a bottle.
Wasn't she one of those Musketeers as well?
Yeah, so Britney and Justin Timberlake.
Right, so we get these Musketeers, and then, what is that, like the luge to hell?
That's
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I look at it like, how the heck were Elisa Slavic and Netpolino Suyuzlak and you together in one place? Look at that. It was like our own version of the Musketeers.
It was, but you know what I mean? But we're all on the up and up now.
You got it. Mm-hmm. All right, so this is healthcare related, so I had to throw something for you, but I think it's Peter Houghton, I could be incorrect, is the first patient to receive the Jarvik 2000. That's the first total artificial heart that could maintain blood flow in addition to generating a pulse. And you said that if we can secrete it, you can measure it in the first episode. Right. So since that mentions blood flow, I figured maybe that was relevant to you.
It is relevant to me. You just start to think like, okay, so that was from the year 2000. And so here we are now in 2016. And what are we doing now? We're growing right? We're growing organs for transplant, okay?
is
So
amazing.
it's amazing. So there we went from a mechanized, and really, when you think about that, this is only 16 years later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And again, I think that's part of understanding big data and seeing how things could come together and looking at the like the overlaps and things.
Exactly.
So there we go from a mechanized heart, and then 16 years later, we're like growing. You know, I hate to say ears on the back of mice, but that is what we're doing, right? You know what I mean? Growing livers.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. That's Dr. Lisa Walters, a.k.a. Ziggy Zalek. We're in the midst of sights and sounds of marketing. Peanuts creator Charles Schulz passes away in the year 2000.
I love Charles Schulz because I love Peanuts.
You like drew stuff all the time.
I did. Snoopy was like my favorite. I love Snoopy, and I think he was really on to something. Like now, like in retrospect, as I look back, like the dynamics that he has amongst the characters, I think are rather interesting because there's like a if I can mention it, I don't know if I should, but there's Dr. Tony Alessandra. He talks about the 4 communication temperaments, and like one is like, did you know that most of the world is introverted? Did you know that? You probably did know
There's
that, but we didn't know that, right?
That book that says that how introverts deal with it. But go ahead.
Yeah, right. Okay, so but like that was astounding to me. The 80% of the world is introverted. And I was telling that to my husband. I said, I never realized that. He said, because you've never been quiet enough to know it. You know what I mean? You've always filled in the gaps, you know? So, but like really like Dr. Alessandra has like the thinker and the relator. Well, the thinker is Linus and the relator is Charlie Brown.
Yes.
And then there's like the director and the socializer. And the director is Lucy. And the socializer, of course, is Snoopy. And it
Maybe Peppermint Patty.
Maybe, where I don't know.
Peppermint Patty was
different.
Clutch to that.
Yeah.
How about that being progressive that early?
I think so. There's a lot of speculation.
Really interesting way to think about
it. It was. It was.
Yeah.
It really is. And so I think Charles Schulz was, you know, when you look at the writings and how the kids interact and things like that, I think it's just a commentary. I do. I think he was ahead of his time.
See, I knew that was going to rock with you.
I know, Snoopy.
In the year 2000, Elian Gonzalez gets sent back to Cuba to his father after his mother drowns while fleeing Cuba.
Yeah, remember that big controversy? He looked like your son.
Do you remember that chaos?
Just
I told her that. I said, this is the reason we're putting this in there. And so, listen, this happens in 2000. And Alec and Elian Gonzalez looked exactly alike. It was so bad. I was like, I was showing pictures. I'm going, look at my son. And then look at Elian Gonzalez. They looked identical. They had that beaming smile, dark complected, dark hair.
That was really upsetting. You know what I mean? People really, it was a divisive.
It was.
Situation. And now again, here we are 16 years later, and we're normalizing relations with Cuba.
Yes. And they say that they're not going to be able to meet the demand for cigars, which bothers me.
What are you going to do?
Well, I don't get Cubans very often, but they're saying that once you can get Cubans, that we're going to want them so bad that they won't have enough demand for us.
Did they do a forecast on that?
Yeah, they
How
did.
credible is it?
Well, I don't know what kind of data. The data was vivacious, but it wasn't veracity-ish. And in 2000, Zig earned her PhD. Woo! Tell us about the thesis that they had you do and how long it took and that kind of stuff, because I always find it compelling.
A couple years. I did a study on using the Hersey Blanchard model of situational leadership and what type of leadership was necessary to lead in a regulated environment. So that was like when I started really getting interested in this idea of compliance back then. The Hersey Blanchard model gives you different levels of readiness within an organization to take over any initiative, like a transformational change or whatever the case may be. And they would say that the leader really has an obligation to recognize where the organization is in terms of that readiness and then lead according to that. So it'd be like if you want to do it, and they do say it organizationally, and then they do also provide it as individuals. So, but like say you were okay, like so you're very well experienced, you're fabulous marketer, and you went somewhere. Huh?
Handsome.
Handsome. I was going to say that, but then I don't want to tick people off.
Yeah.
Okay, so they might you're there doing your work, and you know what you're doing. You're at a higher level of readiness, but then you might have like maybe even I don't want to say that this ever would happen. Maybe you have a client, and the client is like on you,
Yes.
watching you,
Yes.
micromanaging
Yes.
you, and you're like, so what that'll be is like you'll be like, well, if you want me to be a baby, I'll be a baby. I'll send you a project report every 2 hours. You want that? So you're not you want to get rid of that client. Do you see what I mean? You don't
Yes.
you might not feel as well, this guy doesn't trust
Wait,
me.
I have to get Sue. What do you think about this?
I'm doing a search. Do you know what I'm doing?
Because
Go ahead.
Did you
Because
hear-
you totally busted me doing something.
did you hear what she just said though?
Yes.
That's it's
That's
something
us.
very current.
Yes. Incredibly current.
But because you're hired for your expertise, you know what
Yes.
you're doing, and if you're at a high level of readiness, then it should be hands off.
Yes.
And so that was what my study was on.
That's awesome. Now, how lengthy is that study? Is it like 200 pages?
No, well, I don't really remember how because the way you set up a dissertation, right? You have like different chapters. You have like the literature
Yeah.
review, all of that. So I mean, when it's all said and done, it's a little book.
But it's sort of like I realize some of it's awesome because it forces you to do things. Like I always tell people, my MBA taught me to have a more global perspective.
right.
So that was my major takeaway. There's all kinds of shit I learned, but that's the major takeaway. And I realized the dissertation taught you things of how to lead. But we also had a guest tell us that it becomes a bit of a game, that some of the people on that committee try to make it hard for you.
Oh, I had a guy that was very hard. Like when I called and said, this is how I was going to propose this. And because what I did is I just compared two plants, two organizations. And he gave me a really hard time. He's like, I don't know, you're not collecting any real quantitative data. You're using all qualitative data. I had, how are you going to draw a statistical conclusion from this? And I mean, and I was really stumped. I really didn't know what to do. I mean, to the point where I was like, I'm not doing it. I was going to quit, and then I talked to another member of the committee, and she, was much more like, well, let's approach it in another way. Let's try to do this. And, and just because you're doing it this way doesn't make it wrong. And then that meant that they had the talk. So there was a little bit of politics, I think within it. But I wouldn't say that. I mean, I've heard horror stories of
Yes.
people that couldn't get their PhDs, the committee together because the committee members didn't like each other even. I've heard of that. I don't know how,
It's crazy.
but I've heard anecdotally about that.
So we got through a lot of names, and we ran long, and I apologize
Sorry.
to our listeners. No,
No, it was
I
a good
loved
conversation.
it. Zig, this was therapeutic. This was great. And I was the reason I ran long because I kept babbling about the old days. But this was a great time. So I want to make sure that our listeners can reach out to you if they want to learn more about the school, learn more about what you do. What contact information do you want to give them? LinkedIn? You want to give them an email? Whatever.
Yeah,
you
I'm
want.
on LinkedIn, Lisa M. Walters, and the State University of New York at Fredonia. You can reach me at the university, 716-673-3504, or you can call me on my cell phone, 814-449-8150.
So they can reach you and reach out to you, and you might get some younger people that want to learn about your path and maybe how to follow it at State University of New York. So Zig, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. It was so nice to see you.
Wasn't
it was
that
so much
easy?
fun.
Come on.
Yeah, that was
Told
so
you.
mush fun.
She was so nervous. She arrived yesterday
I
for the
did.
show.
I did. I've been out there like a groupie since 3 a.m. Is David Mastovich here yet?
They're all going, who's that? Thanks for joining us for the No Bullshit Marketing Podcast. Visit boldsolutionsnobs.com for show notes plus additional marketing and messaging resources. You can find out about getting that free Audible at audiblefreetrial.com/nobs. And you can also sign up for light reading. You'll receive valuable strategies every other week to improve your marketing and transform your message. It really is light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. To sign up, visit masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold